polymath, or homo universalis, is somebody who excels in multiple different disciplines, who's able to contribute meaningful work across multiple different fields. So the prototypical example of the polymath is Leonardo da Vinci, the painter, the writer, the scientist, the inventor. But during his time, the Renaissance period, and throughout history, it was actually much more common for people to be polymaths of this ilk. Renaissance men and women, aristocrats, they would spend their evenings writing, painting, listening to music, playing instruments, doing experiments, reading, learning about science, writing theories. It's something that we just don't do anymore. So what happens to the polymaths? Where did they all go? There's actually a lot of reasons for this. First of all, those people were aristocrats, like I said. These were very wealthy, very fortunate individuals who didn't have to work, didn't have to graft. They had plenty of free time in order to pursue the finer things in life, and they're probably pretty bored. So what else are you going to do when you don't have TV, when you don't have a Nintendo Switch in order to distract you? When was the last time you came home from a very busy day at work and decided you wanted to learn about quantum physics and then build a robot? At the same time, another reason for this was that back then, during that period, each field had progressed not as far as it has today. These days, in order to make a significant contribution to even an incredibly niche field, let's say gaze direction in primates, you'd need to do years of study. You'd need to pursue a PhD and probably do tons of your own research, and even then, you'd only know about that very specific aspect of biology. There's just too much to know. Point is, you need all that study, you need all that background. It takes so long in order to learn enough to progress that you need to specialize in order to make any kind of significant contribution, or at least that's the theory. But I'm here to argue that we're going through a renaissance of Renaissance men and women. I'm here to argue that this is the second coming of the polymath, the digital polymath. First of all, we now have access to more information online than ever before. We now live in a time when anyone can study anything without leaving their house, and that of course creates huge potential for learning multiple different fields, multiple different topics. At the same time, we're reaching a point where you actually don't need to become a master of your subject in order to contribute once again. And the example I'd like to talk about is game development, and indie games in particular. So when games first came about, they ran on Spectrums, they ran on Tatung Einsteins and BBCs and Amstrads. They were very simple, they had small processing power. Anyone could make a hit game in their attic, in their mum's basement, because they didn't need a huge team. They only had about 2 megabytes to work with on a cassette tape, so they couldn't create these hugely detailed worlds. They couldn't record music, so they didn't need to score their own soundtracks. They didn't need to find people to record the voiceovers, famous actors, and the graphics powers just weren't there. Most sprites were a couple of pixels at most, so it didn't take long for anyone to create a game and then compete with the best of the best. So it would only take a couple of people to make a game like Arkanoid and have a massive hit on their hands. Then games got grander in scope, they got more ambitious. We got things like Shenmue, a fantastic game that's just been re-released, which had an orchestral soundtrack and such a detailed world that you could control Ryo around his house and go into every single individual drawer, pick out each item and move it around in 3D. How was one person supposed to compete with that? And so games developers became large teams. Games cost thousands or millions of dollars to create, and it wasn't possible anymore for one person to compete with a huge corporation. But then it changed again, because tools like Unity and like Unreal Engine give we indie developers the tools we need to create something far more powerful without having to build it from scratch. So if you install Unity on your PC and start developing with that, for instance, you can use that physics engine. So that means it calculates things like gravity, the way things bounce, the way things move. You can go on a asset store, you can download 3D models, or you can get 3D models for free online. You can import those into your game, so you can have a hugely detailed tree in seconds without having to create it yourself. So we have crowdsourcing, we have far more powerful tools, and we have this open source attitude that allows us to work together and to build off of what other people have created. And the same goes for a ton of other industries. We now have incredibly powerful cameras right in our pockets. We have access to high-tech editing software. We can create things that we never could have before. We can use Fiverr in order to outsource the bits we can't do ourselves, and we can build on the work and the research of other people and discuss it on forums in order to fill in the blanks in our own knowledge. So using the internet as a resource for information and at the same time a collaborative tool, it's possible for an individual to now do what would have once taken a huge team. And so once again, we're seeing a resurgence of the polymath, people who are skilled in multiple disciplines.
Genius, billionaire, playboy, philanthropist.
video editors who can also play music, who can also write, who can also sing, who also know a ton about quantum physics and are building projects in their basements. This is now a thing again, and thanks to the gig economy, which I've talked about before and which I'm writing a book on right at the moment, it's now possible to make a living this way as well, from delving into all kinds of different skills. I actually think that the impetus is on us now to educate ourselves and to build our own skill sets and our own abilities. And actually, I think it's really important that you do this. Salaries are no longer increasing at the rate of inflation, and so the only way you can stand out and get ahead of the pack is to add letters after your name, to gain new skills, new experiences, to add to your portfolio, to head out there and to train yourself. If your company isn't offering you those training opportunities, and you should definitely take them if it is, well then you need to go out there and you need to find them yourself. This is especially true for people like me who are self-employed, but I also think it's true for anyone else. There's no reason that you can't, at the weekends, volunteer somewhere where you're going to get invaluable experience. There's no reason why you can't do an online course that's going to give you extra skills and make you more employable. At the same time, creativity, as I've talked about on this channel many times before, is essentially defined as connecting disparate ideas. There's no such thing as an original idea, there's just an original permutation of existing ideas. So the more different topics you understand, the greater you're going to be at bringing those different ideas together, looking at them from different angles and different contexts and coming up with new ideas. And it's creative work, make no mistake, that's going to survive when machine learning and automation begin to take our jobs. Because whilst an automated program can handle customer service, whilst it can do data entry, it can only do basic programming, no real problem solving, and it can't do creative work. It also doesn't have empathy. So think about the skills you need to develop in order to survive and thrive in the coming economy, in the fourth industrial revolution, as some people are calling it. And of course, here at The Bioneer, we're interested in doing whatever you can in order to improve yourself, whether that means getting smarter, stronger, faster, more creative, in order to live the life that you want and have more freedom and excitement. And one of the best ways to go about this is by learning more things. So many people are focused on boosting their memory, boosting their focus, but if you can learn more skills, then you gain exponential new capabilities. Imagine being able to open a lock because you know how to pick that lock. Imagine being able to talk any language when you're abroad and impress the people you're with. Imagine being able to create entirely new things or learning more about the human body in order to train in a better way. Imagine learning martial arts, using all of the tools and resources on the web in order to do this. And I think that we are seeing this more and more. I think more people are better educated and have more knowledge than they did not that long ago, thanks to the internet. Even if you aren't actively pursuing that extra information, just being on YouTube and watching videos like this one, watching TED Talks and things, is giving you a greater understanding. And when you watch videos on games and on videos, when you watch someone like Mark Brown, or when you watch someone like the Nerd Writer or someone like Captain Midnight, you realize these people are talking about nerdy stuff, you know, computer games and comics and films, in a way that shows a much greater understanding of the artistry that goes into it and the design. We're appreciating things on a much higher level thanks to this open forum where we can discuss them. It's a hugely exciting time to be alive. I've talked about it before. We're always down on humanity and the direction we're taking, but actually we're also making huge strides, and the internet offers such incredible potential. If we all become digital polymaths, imagine what we could accomplish together. So if you want to heed this advice and you want to become the digital polymath, what can you do to start making it happen? Well, you're starting off well by watching videos on YouTube. There's tons of information that's completely freely available here, and a quick tip is to put it on 2x speed. I do that a lot, and that way you can absorb more information more quickly. At the same time, you can do the same trick over at Audible or with podcasts. And podcasts and things like Audible are also really useful for multitasking. They allow you to learn whilst you're doing something else. So we don't have that much time in the day, but if you make a commute to work, if you're cooking, if you're working out, then there's nothing to stop you putting on a podcast or listening to a YouTube presentation or listening to an audiobook as you do that in order to learn as you go. At the same time, of course, there are tons of resources for people who want to learn more about specific skills or want to gain qualifications. These days you can get a personal training qualification online, the exact same one that you get in person. You can get accounting qualifications online, business qualifications, coaching, whatever you're interested in, you can get really decent qualifications. Then there are the much shorter courses, the things that are either free or paid, things like Udacity can give you these, or Skillshare. There's tons of them. I'm helping Android Authority work on some programming courses at their DGIT Academy. All these options give you ways that you can learn online. Set aside some time and consider it in just the same way that you consider your workouts at the gym. It's a form of self-improvement. It is a kind of workout, so dedicate the same time to it. Give yourself an hour a week, half an hour a week, whatever you can afford to learning. Google, of course, is also an incredibly valuable resource, also Google Scholar, and so is knowing how to phrase questions so that Google will give you the correct answer. There is a skill to Googling, and there's a skill to asking the right questions in general. Once you find the website you're looking for, or you find the book that you want to read, being able to read quickly is also really important, so I recommend brushing up on your speed reading techniques.
I know Kung Fu.
I'd like to do a video entirely on speed reading in future, but for now, a couple of tips. The first is know what it is that you're going in for, the information you want, read the blurb, read some reviews, and then head into that book looking for that thing and ignoring what's not useful. Another tip is not to sound out the words in your head, but instead to just glaze your eyes over it and try and absorb the meaning. Look at the words, don't necessarily sound them out. I have two ways of reading. I used to think I was the slowest reader in the world because I'd take a book and I'd like sound it out in my head the way my mum used to do when she'd read to me. I'd put on the voices and everything. I'd be like, "Well, who goes there?" said Gandalf, smiling wryly. And then I'd obviously take a long time to read, and I still read like that when I'm reading a novel that I really enjoy. But when I'm reading a textbook or a book like Nudge or like Deep Work, something like that, then I read in a different way. I glaze my eyes across it, I pick out the meaning, and I stop and I read more deeply at the areas that I'm most interested in. You can then also use accelerated learning techniques in order to make sure that you're picking up that information more quickly. So one of the big problems when you're doing what I just described, skimming through information, is that we can end up glazing over it and not really engaging with it. A solution to this problem is to use the Feynman Technique, named for Richard Feynman, and this basically provides a framework, a structure for making sure that you really understand what it is that you've been reading. And it's based around the idea of teaching someone else in the most simple way possible. So after you've read the book or the text or whatever, your job is to try and explain what you just read in simple terms to someone else, ideally using things like metaphors and analogies. If you can't do that, then you've found a gap in your knowledge, and that's what you then need to go and learn more about. As you can see then, learning topics and becoming a polymath obviously isn't about just being able to rote repeat numbers and facts, it's about engaging with that information, and this not only helps us to better understand it and actually employ it, but it also helps us to become better at retaining that information and storing it. And a great article by Scott H. Young explains how one of the most important factors is how you connect the information that you learn with other information. That's how we cement it, because it's how we see its context and it's how we see its value to us. So don't just read, don't just skim, don't just listen, but actually think about how it relates to other things you know, create metaphors. And one of my favorite tips, I'll leave the link to that article in the description down below, by the way. One of my favorite tips is to write about what it is you want to learn, because this not only forces you to repeat what you've learned, but it also forces you to understand it and to regurgitate it and to put it into context in a way that makes it make sense. I'm a writer by trade. I write 10,000 words a day as a minimum most of the time, and so I've learned all kinds of weird stuff. Some of it really useful, it's how I've learned a lot of my programming, some of it really not useful. Every now and then though, something I thought wasn't useful will come in handy, such as when I managed to open up a door that we were locked out of because I'd written articles on lockpicking, and such as when I was able to fix the cistern in the bathroom because I'd written an article about that. So there's value in every kind of information, by the way. There's an extra little tip. What's similarly really important when it comes to giving context to what you're learning and actually applying it is to have some kind of goal in mind or some kind of target. And this is what I've talked about in the past when I've talked about learning to program, but don't just try and learn to program. Don't say I'm going to learn Java. Try and learn to make something that's actually useful or interesting to you. So try and make a calculator, or try and make a game, or try and make anything. Doing this gives you much more focus. It means you're not learning a huge abstract topic, but you can follow steps in order to get to an end destination. And of course you can then build on that project or make something more creative or more challenging, and thereby learn more information and keep growing your knowledge. In fact, most programmers would tell you they don't know every single statement or command in any given language, they just know the ones they need to get the thing done. The same goes for any other subject. If you want to learn quantum physics, if you want to learn electronic engineering, if you want to learn martial arts, then know what you want to achieve and work towards that goal. If you want to learn a language, say. Obviously this is easier with subjects that allow you to build something, but at the same time you can do the same thing by setting yourself some kind of more abstract goal, such as being able to converse with someone who knows about that subject, or being able to understand a specific theory, or being able to talk that language well enough to survive an interview, as Tim Ferriss did in one of his episodes. This is the exact tip that is shared in Josh Kaufman's excellent book, The First 20 Hours. He talks about a minimum target performance level. And this is basically the set level you're trying to achieve. Rather than just trying to know everything, know what you want to do. And as a polymath, that's really useful because you can know what you need from each disparate subject in order to achieve the thing that you're trying to achieve by bringing together those different skill sets in the unique way that makes us highly valuable as professionals in this new economy. Tim Ferriss also has his own approach to accelerated learning, by the way. He calls his the DIS method, and this basically breaks down learning into different steps. That includes dissecting, it includes interviewing, sequencing, and this basically means that you're not just going to learn something following the normal steps that you find in the textbooks, but think about what the best order to learn is. And he often talks about starting from the end point. So in the case of learning to play chess, he might talk about looking at the finishing position on the board and then working backwards. Or he might talk about learning the most difficult move in a dance and then working backwards to learn the more basic footing. And this basically, again, gives context to what you're doing, gives it more meaning, makes it more interesting. Emotion is really important when you learn anything because emotion is what makes us learn. When we find something to be seemingly important to us, even if it shouldn't be, whether it's entertaining, whether it's funny, whether it's something we think we can use to work towards our goals, then our brain releases hormones, BDNF, dopamine, etc., that makes us focused and that makes us more likely to form permanent neural connections. When we're not engaged because it's so abstract and it's hard to relate to our own lives or it's just dry information, then we just forget. And this is also why it's a really good idea to use different mediums when you're learning. This is again where the internet can come in so handy because you can watch videos, you can listen to music, you can listen to podcasts, you can talk with people over Skype, and all these different formats help you to cement that information more clearly because it's saved in multiple different modalities. Oh, and guys, of course there is merit in doing whatever you can to improve your health, to get better sleep, to exercise, and thereby encourage brain plasticity. You can also use certain nootropics very carefully. I recommend the natural ones in order to enhance your plasticity. And I did a whole video on brain plasticity that I highly recommend you check out as well. The really great thing is that brain plasticity is a kind of virtuous cycle. Once you start learning more, your brain becomes more plastic, and this makes it easier to learn more. This is why children's brains are so plastic, I believe, not only because they go through some kind of sensitive period in their biology due to their natural development, but because everything that they do is new, from walking to listening to looking, and thereby their brain is awash with hormones because they're constantly amazed, they're constantly in awe, and this makes their brains more plastic. On one last related tip, you can also achieve something similar by subjecting yourself to more experiences, by traveling, by having those moments of awe where you see incredible views, and this will likewise help you to increase your plasticity and your ability to learn. A lot of people who are really focused on self-improvement and learning, they make what I believe is a big mistake. They focus on just doing those things. They cut out all the fun stuff, their relationships, watching TV, going out drinking. I actually believe that having all these pillars in your life not only makes you happier, but it gives you all those experiences that enriches your brain and makes you better able to learn and better able to perform. Of course, there will be some rote learning of dry facts. It's unavoidable in pretty much any subject, so here you can start using memory master techniques. I did a whole video on this over on my video on thinking like Sherlock Holmes. I'll leave the link in the description down below. Recommend you check that out. I'm going to do more on memory in the future, but something I'd like to talk about for now is using Anki flashcards. So Anki is a piece of software that helps you to learn by looking at flashcards and then testing your knowledge. And it's supposed to make you more likely to learn the subjects that you're trying to learn than competing software or competing methods. The reason for this is that it applies two methods that have been demonstrated in studies to be effective. The first is active recall. Basically, being asked questions, being tested on something is superior to just listening to it and learning it in a passive way. This is why regurgitating and teaching it is so useful. It's why writing about it is so useful. But just remembering and regurgitating that information back as we did at school is also useful, because when we access information, we're practicing accessing it, making it more available and increasing those neural connections. At the same time, Anki flashcards use something called spaced learning. Spaced learning basically means that you're asking yourself questions, you're rehearsing, but then you're taking a scheduled break at the optimum amount of time. And this has been shown in studies to also increase our likelihood of memorizing something. The explanation given for why this works is that it allows the information to move from short-term memory to long-term memory so that we're then accessing it from there again. If you watched my video on working memory, and of course I recommend that you do, then you'll know that short-term memory might not necessarily be a storage container as people used to think, but rather it might just be activation in our brain, as in what seems to be in our working memory is just the neural connections that are activated or that are potentiated. It's when we visualize something in our mind's eye. I don't know what relation this would have to space learning or why it works, but I suppose letting the neurons go cold and then reactivating them might make them more likely to form a long-term connection. But whatever, I don't know why this works, but it does work, and studies demonstrate that it works. And the other great thing about Anki flashcards is that there's a huge community, and you can find stacks that other people have made. So if you want to learn about physiology, muscles of the leg, a particular programming language, geography in a particular area, you'll be able to find the flashcards that other people have created online and download them and use them for free so you can test yourself wherever you are. It's a really great resource, and it's a fantastic example of using the internet in order to learn faster, using not only the internet as a resource of information, but using it as a way to crowdsource all that information and utilize the power of the masses, the groupthink. There are many more examples of accelerated learning techniques, many more tips you can utilize in order to learn faster and for longer. However, the main point of this video, other than the fact that you should learn lots of different things, is that by combining the huge resource and power of the internet with accelerated learning techniques and with an end goal in mind, and then applying it to the gig economy or our new economy where staying in one job for a long time isn't so common, is an incredibly powerful and worthwhile endeavor. I'd love to know what other tips you have. Let me know in the comments down below. I'd love to know what books you recommend, what YouTube channels, all that. Let's discuss it together. Thanks a ton for watching, I really appreciate it. If you enjoyed this video, then please leave a like, please share it around. That helps me out immensely. We're really close to 50,000 subscribers now, which is awesome. So thanks a ton for that. Thanks also to Grant, who's been doing a fantastic job with the martial arts content. And I've got some more interesting contributors hopefully lined up for you soon. So stay tuned, there's lots of awesome stuff coming to the channel very soon. And in the short term, I'll be doing my promised videos on Bruce Lee, the myth versus reality, as well as a real-life Bruce Wayne style training program. So if that sounds good, then subscribe. I'll see you next time. Thanks a ton for watching, and bye for now.